Sometimes you come across a story and you're just like, whoa, hold on, what's happening here?
Yeah,
And the article you sent us about Trump's potential pick for the Pentagon,
right.
this is one of those moments.
For sure.
We're diving into a potential shakeup at the very top of the U.S. military.
It's always interesting, how a new administration approaches military leadership.
Yeah.
These presidential appointments, especially for a position like Secretary of Defense,
Oh, yeah.
can really have like a ripple effect through the entire structure.
Absolutely. And in this case, the ripples might be more like tidal waves.
Yeah.
Trump's nominee, Pete Hegseth,
Right.
he's known for his strong opinions,
Yeah.
particularly his criticism of what he calls this woke military culture.
Hegseth's nomination has definitely like stirred the pot.
Yeah.
He's a combat veteran. He's a Fox News personality
Her-
and the author of War on Warriors,
Right.
a book where he really lays out his views.
Okay.
What's interesting here is his close relationship with Trump. He even served as an informal advisor during Trump's first term.
I see.
So his influence isn't anything new.
So he's not just some talking head on TV. He's actually had the president's ear before.
Exactly.
And that makes this potential appointment even more significant.
For sure.
And let's be honest, the fact that he's openly talked about firing the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Charles Q. Brown Jr.,
Right.
that adds a whole other layer of intrigue to this situation.
You got to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and you got to fire this. Obviously, you're going to bring in a new Secretary of Defense, but any general that was involved, general, admiral, whatever that was involved in any of the DEI woke shit, it's got to go.
Yeah.
His call to fire General Brown and any leader who supports these diversity and inclusion initiatives really highlights the core of Hegseth's criticism.
Okay.
He believes that these initiatives have weakened the military, lowered standards, and shifted the focus away from what he sees as the core mission, combat readiness.
Okay, so let's unpack this idea of a woke military culture a bit.
Okay.
It's a term that gets thrown around a lot.
Right.
But what does it actually mean in this context?
Yeah.
What specific policies or actions is Hegseth targeting?
So in essence, Hegseth sees this wokeness in the military as an overemphasis on social justice
Okay.
and identity politics at the expense of traditional military values.
Got it.
He points to things like diversity quota, sensitivity training, and the inclusion of women in combat roles as evidence of this trend.
Okay.
He argues that these initiatives create divisions within the ranks, lower morale,
Right.
and ultimately make the military less effective.
And how does this contrast with the previous administration's approach to diversity and inclusion in the military?
Well, the contrast is pretty stark.
Okay.
The Biden administration saw these initiatives as crucial for building a stronger, more representative force. They argued that a diverse military is better equipped to handle the complexities of modern warfare,
Right.
and that inclusion is essential for morale and unit cohesion.
Yeah.
They saw it as progress, while Hegseth views it as a problem.
So we have these two very different philosophies clashing head on. It makes you wonder, what historical parallels are there to this kind of ideological battle within the military?
Yeah.
Have we seen similar situations in the past?
It's not entirely unprecedented.
Okay.
We've certainly seen periods of tension between civilian leadership and military brass,
Yeah.
particularly when there's a shift in political ideology or a perceived need for reform. For example, President Truman's decision to desegregate the military in 1948
Right.
faced significant pushback from some within the military establishment.
You're right. That's a great example.
Yeah.
Truman faced opposition, but he ultimately pushed through a change that had a profound impact on the military and society as a whole.
Absolutely.
And Hegseth seems to be aiming for a similarly impactful,
Yeah.
albeit in the opposite direction,
Right.
kind of transformation.
Yeah.
But before we get into the potential fallout of that,
Okay.
let's take a closer look at Hegseth's background
Okay.
and what it might tell us about his approach to leadership.
That's a crucial point. Understanding his background and past actions can give us valuable insights into his potential leadership style and the decisions he might make.
Right.
We already mentioned his close ties to Trump,
Yeah.
but there's more to the story.
Right. There are other aspects of his career that are raising eyebrows,
Yeah.
even among those who might generally agree with his stance on wokeness in the military.
Exactly. And this is where things get even more interesting. One specific incident that stands out is Hegseth's role in influencing Trump to pardon service members
Oh, yeah.
accused or convicted of war crimes.
Right.
He was a very vocal advocate for these pardons,
Yeah.
arguing that the military justice system was flawed and that these soldiers were being unfairly punished.
That's right. And that decision sparked a lot of controversy.
Oh, yeah.
Some saw it as undermining the rule of law and military discipline,
Right.
while others viewed it as a necessary corrective to a system that they felt was too harsh.
It definitely demonstrated Hegseth's willingness to challenge established norms
Yeah.
and procedures within the military. Right. And it raises questions about his approach to accountability.
Oh.
Would he be willing to hold those under his command to the same standards? Or would loyalty trump accountability in his decision-making?
It's a crucial question, especially when you consider his history of criticizing military leadership.
Right.
He's been very vocal in expressing his belief that generals haven't been held accountable for failures in Iraq and Afghanistan.
For sure.
It makes you wonder, what kind of relationship would he have with the top brass
Yeah.
if you were confirmed as Secretary of Defense?
It's safe to say that things could get pretty tense.
Yeah.
Imagine him leading the Pentagon while openly feuding with the very generals he's supposed to be working with.
Right.
That's a recipe for dysfunction.
Yeah.
And potentially dangerous consequences for national security.
And speaking of consequences, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the potential global impact of Hegseth's proposed changes. If he's confirmed and implements his vision, how might that be perceived by our allies and adversaries around the world?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
And one that I think deserves more attention.
Yeah.
Many of our allies, particularly in Europe, have embraced similar diversity and inclusion initiatives within their own militaries. They see it as a way to strengthen their forces and better reflect the societies they represent.
I see.
Hegseth's rollback of these initiatives could be viewed as a step backwards.
Yeah.
Potentially straining relationships and undermining our credibility on the global stage.
It's like we're sending mixed signals.
Right.
On the one hand, we're promoting democracy and human rights.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we're seemingly retreating from those values within our own military. That kind of inconsistency can create confusion and make it harder to build trust with our partners.
Exactly. And then there's the question of how our adversaries might perceive this shift.
Right.
Countries like China and Russia have long criticized the U.S. for imposing its values on others.
They might seize on Hegseth's rhetoric and actions as evidence of American hypocrisy.
I see.
And use it to further their own agendas.
It's a complex geopolitical chess game.
Yeah.
And Hegseth's nomination could be a game changer.
For sure.
For better or for worse.
Either you're in for war fighting, and that's it. And that's the only litmus test we care about. You got to get DEI and CRT out of military academies, so you're not training young officers to be baptized in this type of thinking. And then, whatever the standards, whatever the combat standards were, say, in, 1995, let's just make those the standards. And as far as recruiting, to hire the guy that, did Top Gun Maverick and create some real ads that motivate people to want to serve.
Absolutely.
But before we spiral too far down that rabbit hole,
Okay.
let's bring it back to the domestic front for a moment.
Right.
We've talked about the potential impact on military readiness, morale, and global relationships.
Right.
But what about the broader implications for civil military relations in the U.S.?
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
The relationship between civilian leadership and the military is a cornerstone of American democracy.
Right.
It's based on the principle of civilian control, where elected officials set the overall direction and policy,
Right.
while the military carries out those orders in a nonpartisan manner.
And that balance has been carefully maintained for generations.
It has.
But Hegseth's close ties to Trump, his willingness to challenge military norms,
And his potentially more politicized approach raised concerns about whether that balance would be preserved.
there's a risk that his leadership could further blur the lines between politics and the military.
Yeah.
Imagine a scenario where military decisions are seen as being driven by partisan interests rather than strategic objectives. That kind of erosion of trust could have far-reaching consequences for our democracy.
It's a sobering thought, and it really underscores the stakes involved in this nomination.
Absolutely.
We're not just talking about personnel changes at the Pentagon.
Right.
We're talking about potentially fundamental shifts in how the U.S. military operates and its role in American society.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important to have an informed public discourse about these issues.
Yeah.
We need to move beyond the sound bites and slogans and really grapple with the complexities and nuances of this situation.
Absolutely. And I think that's a perfect segue into the heart of what we're trying to do here with this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're not just summarizing the news. We're trying to connect the dots explore the different perspectives.
For sure.
And help our listeners understand the potential consequences of these decisions.
I completely agree. We've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
But there's one more aspect of Hegseth's background that I think is worth examining.
Okay.
It might shed light on how he views the role of the military in society
Okay.
and how he might approach the challenges facing the U.S. on the global stage.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What is it?
Well, it's fascinating to consider Hegseth's background as a combat veteran.
Right.
He served in Iraq
Mm-hmm.
and has spoken extensively about his experiences.
Yeah.
This firsthand knowledge of war
Right.
undoubtedly shapes his worldview and his approach to military matters.
You're right. That's an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have strong opinions about military policy from a distance,
Yeah.
but it's quite another to have actually experienced the realities of combat.
Oh,
That kind of experience can have a profound impact on someone's perspective.
for sure. And it's something we need to keep in mind when analyzing his potential leadership.
Yeah.
His combat experience might lead him to prioritize certain aspects of military readiness.
Right.
Or to approach certain conflicts with a particular mindset.
I see.
It also raises the question of how his views on wokeness might align with the actual experiences and perspectives of those currently serving in the military.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
Would his vision for a less woke military resonate with those on the front lines?
Yeah.
Or would it create more division and tension within the ranks?
Right.
It's hard to say for sure without getting more input from current service members.
Exactly. It's crucial to avoid making assumptions about what's best for the military.
Yeah.
Without actually listening to the voices of those who are serving.
Right.
And it's also important to remember that the military is a vast and diverse organization. There are likely a wide range of views on these issues within the ranks, just as there are in society as a whole.
You know, this whole situation really highlights the importance of civil-military relations and the need for open and honest communication
For sure.
between civilian leaders and military professionals.
Absolutely.
If we want to ensure that the U.S. military remains effective and apolitical, we need to foster an environment
Yeah.
where different perspectives can be heard and debated respectfully.
I couldn't agree more. We need leaders who can bridge divides, build consensus,
Right.
and make decisions that are in the best interest of the country, not just one political party or ideology.
Right.
And we need a public that is engaged and informed about the challenges facing the military and the implications of different policy choices.
Well said. And to our listener, thank you for sending us this article and sparking this incredibly thought-provoking discussion. It's been a real deep dive, and I think we've all learned a lot along the way.
It's been a pleasure exploring these complex issues with you, and I hope our listeners are walking away with a deeper understanding of the potential ramifications of this nomination and the importance of staying engaged in the conversation about the future of the U.S. military.
This situation really raises a big question. What does it mean to have a strong and effective military in the 21st century?
Right.
And how do we balance the need for combat readiness with the values of diversity, inclusion, and respect for human rights? Something to ponder, for sure.
Indeed. And as always, we encourage our listeners to share their own thoughts and insights on this topic. Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep diving deep.
It's just scarier when you think about the DoD, when you think about our military, our formations, our ranks, our troops across the board. Even when I've talked to elite soldiers recently, because I kind of thought, hey, it's not as bad in the SEALs and the Green Berets. It's true. They're acknowledging it's starting to creep into those places too. An obsession with what your gender is, what your race is, what your ideology is, whether or not you're a climate warrior, into how you get promoted. It's really bad, really scary. We tell the whole story, anecdotes, evidence in the War on Warriors, and a lot of it comes from my own personal experience as well. Also, if you watched the show this morning, Will and Rachel and I are going to be interviewing former President Trump this afternoon. So if you have any questions about what we should ask potentially the future commander-in-chief, let me know. You know, one of the things I talk about in the book is Obama and Biden and how bad the Pentagon was under their leadership. Trump did what he could to reverse it, including unleash the warfighters. But what could he do in a second term as the head of the Defense Department?